Right, we'll go to the next slide. So what I want to do is give that sort of personal story, and we've talked about testimony, and no one can really knock that, as we've already agreed, and also branding, because we hear about branding all the time. You know, what exactly is branding? How does it relate to us as Christians? If at all. You might think, no, it doesn't relate to me. And what are the key elements in that? So that's what I'm going to try and cover in the next few minutes. So next one, slide please. So the personal story, you've already heard. I'm local, born in London. I was actually a scientist after leaving university, so it seems to be a bit of a science theme going through speakers so far. And I was actually destined to be a doctor. But, you know, destinies change. And that's the thing with destiny. You've got to be cognizant of how it moves on. It's an organic process. And it was while I was at the Royal Free, believing that I was going to be, I was doing pharmaceutical research, and I was going to do the transition to medicine, and then the calling of policing hit me. And how did that happen? Well, at the Royal Free Hospital, they have sort of a sports facility there. And this was in the early 80s. And it used to be used by police officers from Hampstead. And those officers sort of caught me on the blind side, because they never wore their uniform. They were only in their sports gear. And then we'd be playing all sorts of sports, the five-a-side, basketball. And then I found out afterwards that they're police officers. So I started to see the human side of police officers. And it really offset so many things where I thought, actually, you can't treat everyone in the same way. You can't stereotype and generalize. And that's when I realized that police officers are individuals, they're human, like everyone else. And then I looked into the principles of policing, and you know, they're supposed to be peacemakers. And we know in the Beatitudes what peacemakers do. They are sons and daughters of God, yeah. So I started to see that in them, and they told me what they did, and they took me around on one of these sort of tours of duty, and you know, then I realized that policing is very pastoral. It's actually to assist those who need assistance. So as a result of that, I responded to the call in policing. But at the same time, this is where the devil's a liar, he caused my father to be in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong cops. As a result of that, he was beaten up by police officers. And he was 57 years old, a lorry driver. He wasn't your stereotypical, there is such a thing, person who's willing to give police officers trouble. So you can imagine, I've got this challenge, I've got this calling of policing, and then I've got what's happened to my father. And I'm thinking to myself, how did this happen? But like everything, when you reflect on how your life has moved on, and a very important aspect of my life is never to be too comfortable. I don't know about you, but when I get too comfortable, that's when I worry. And that was long before I was a police officer. So I knew I had to take myself out of my comfort zone. And that's exactly what I did. And as a result of that, I joined the police in 1983. And you've already heard a couple of things I did. But the important thing is I've come out 30 years later, in 2013, with a joy in my heart, peace of the Lord in my spirit, and I don't feel any regrets. And I think that's the importance of the legacy. So it's not just my career, but obviously my family. In fact, my son, my oldest son, he was born in week 10 at recruit school. So he's been the embodiment of my career. So I always knew I was getting close to retirement when I saw it. He said he's 30 years old. I said, oh my gosh, I've got to be retiring soon. And the important thing is that the struggle still continues. As I said, I was in the Black Police Association, the BPA, and the challenges within the police service. I'm still struggling with them now, even outside the organisation. In fact, I'm a bit freer to do that. Because a lot of the journeys that we take on, they don't just end. It might move on to different seasons, but the journey continues. And I still chair the Black Police Association Charitable Trust, even though we're changing the name soon. And my social enterprise, REALLITY, which talks about raising everyone's awareness of lives lost in the youth. So it's not a misspelling, it's an acronym of REALLITY. Everyone's asking, do you know how to spell? Anyway. So the essence of the story is your worst nightmare could be your biggest breakthrough. Sometimes we run away from these things and believe, no, that's not for me. No, I'm not put myself through a hardship. And as we heard from the sister before, through our hardships, so many things she can testify to. And, I think it's, not to be too cheesy, but if you don't have a test, how are you going to have this testimony? How are you going to be really saying the Lord showed up? Not necessarily when you just at the lowest common denominator in life and you think the only way is up, but sometimes in just making sure that you're relevant and real for what you're doing in your life, for your family, and for your profession, and for the community. And then it's a question of stay on track and don't be derailed by personalities and prejudices. If I was going to be susceptible to that, I reflect to people are like social seaweed. Whatever direction the tide, the seaweed goes towards. You ever seen? Anyone been to the coast? Yeah, you have? Oh, good. Social seaweed. And especially in social media, people are just, responding to all sorts of things without thinking about it. It's like the Donald Trump thing. Ban him. No, we need to talk to him. And, hopefully he won't be president. But if he does, we still need to talk to him. Even more so then, I would suggest. Next one. Okay. One of the verses that really has kept with me throughout my Christian life, especially in the police service, is Romans 12. And out of that is the bit about present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Now, we've gone past Old Testament when people would sacrifice animals and so forth. But we know that in Jesus' sacrifice for us, for his stripes we are healed, and by his body we are strengthened, and by his spilt blood we are cleansed. But we still need to recognize that we have to be a sacrifice for him. Sometimes we have to go through so much hardship, and we know that being a Christian is maybe one of the toughest things we'll ever do. If we were really into the easy-go, lucky type world and let's go for, an easy life, I would say 99% of us Christians wouldn't do it. Because we know we are going to be persecuted. We're now going to be seen as being different and awkward or out of touch with world. But we would still look at ourselves and say, well, actually, that's the whole reason why I want to be a Christian. I want to be peculiar. I want to be different. I want to be radical for Jesus. And I really want to make sure that it's acceptable to God. So I'm in the police service, so I'm black, I'm a Christian, and I've got attitude. That's pretty good. That's a hard way to grow up in life, But, as I said, got through the other end, and I'm still around. Next one. So this is the sort of personal branding. Now, have we got any marketing people in the? So you know about branding, right? Okay, good. So if I'm going wrong, you just tell me. All right? But this is my personal interpretation, and this is my sort of template. So, for me, branding, we see it's a logo, a slogan, a design, all sorts of things. But how does that come into the personal? So I see it as the main things are our talents. One of the main things in our personal branding is, what is our talents? What's the template for our purpose? So the reason for which something is done or created, or which something exists. So that's the talents going towards the purpose, the reason for which something is done or created. So we all know we've got a reason for us being here, amen? That we didn't just happen to be this random change of 1 million years ago. So we've already got that first, right? So we're here for a reason. And then obviously, what are our values as individuals? Because that influences our destiny. Because sometimes if our values change, the direction of our journey changes, right? And that predetermined course of events you can go off track. And that's one of the things that you've got to be cognizant of. Because if I'd gone for the easy option, I might be maybe a doctor or pharmacologist somewhere. And I know after 30 years in the Met, I knew I had to do that. So I kept my values, and my values was the Word, the principles of how I conduct my life. And then the purpose, working towards our legacy. And that's anything handed down from the past, like our ancestors. I didn't realize how blessed I was with the parents that I had until I became a cop. I really didn't. Again, I don't know if you actually orchestrated this, but that testimony really, really touched me, because I took for granted just having a mother and father who loved and protected me was standard. I really did. It's when I went university, science, policing, and my first police station was where I grew up in Islington, and I realised how bad it was for some people, because I was arresting some of them or taking them into care or protecting them. And I said, how did that happen? And some of them was telling me what they were going through, even when I was in school. And I didn't know this. And I thought, that's one of the reasons why I have to join, is how we can really help others. And don't just rely on others to do it. We have to do our bit. And I suppose that's why my wife always says to me, how comes you are always out and you've got 3 children, and now you've got a grandson, by the way. I've got a little grandson. So you got thank you. He's only 20 months. He's not that big. But he keeps me fit because I have to run him around or run after him all the time. And I said, well, we are blessed. But there's so many people out there that are suffering. And they don't realize how much that people are out there for them. But we need to be explicit. We have to go outside our walls. We have to be outside there to really make a change. And that's why I'm still doing my social enterprise and various other things. So, going back to our talents. So that's the bedrock of the brand. Am I okay so far, Mr. Marketing? Okay. There's always an expert in the audience, and I like that. And how I pitch it is in Philippians 4:13. So I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And the strength of anything, is any engineers in the house? Architects? Is that very important pivotal part of a building. Sometimes they call it the cornerstone. You take out the cornerstone, the building collapses. So you've got to make sure that the foundation in which you stand has that cornerstone, that you can withstand the storms. Because as I already touched on, when you are a Christian, you're ready for the storms. It's not just sweetness and light. It's great when things are great, but I truly believe we need to be celebrating even when it's tough. You know, as I said, I don't like to be too comfortable. So when people run away from the storm, sometimes I step into it, like going into the police. I stepped into it, and it's in the eye of the storm you find that peace. You've got to rely on the Lord. And that's why I always had that rhema verse. Anytime I went into any sort of policing incident or any sort of dealing with a challenging member of the public, I'll repeat that verse because I always felt wherever I was, that was holy ground. And no weapon forms against me will prosper. Because greater is he that is in me than he's in the world. And if he's for us, who can be against us? And it never failed me once. Even when I said that the police service was institutionally racist, me and 2 other colleagues, you can imagine the heat we were getting from our colleagues and members of the public. But at no stage did I feel I was going to be fearful of anyone. I didn't want anyone to feel that I was apologetic. That's what I'm talking about. I have attitude when it comes to being a person of faith in the church. But you've got to have attitude, isn't it? I mean, how many guys in almost 60 can wear a jacket like this? You know? You got to have attitude, no? See, I know my brand. I know my brand. Next slide, please. So those values we're talking about, you know, the principles of where we stand. Because then, as it said in Proverbs 16:3, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. So don't plan without getting guidance. You know, pray into these things. You know, the best thing I did 40 years ago was to choose my wife. I met her in 1976, right? That's the best decision I made. Because, you know what? Because she is the biggest challenge to me. So not only do I have to commit it to the Lord, I've got to commit it to her. And I'm telling you everything. She would have been here with me, but she's planning this party thing. You really need to commit that plans to the Lord. I think there's too many guys there who can relate to this. You've got to make those foundations strong. You know? And we know so many principles where things are not strong and it ends up where people lose everything. Again, I don't know if this testimony this young lady put, it's just so timely. She had everything. You know, I'm not sure about the rat in the road bit, but she had everything. But she lost everything again. Because it's so important that you keep that foundation. Because then you realize how much it's in your DNA. You know, how many millions of chromosomes. It's in your DNA. Next one. So it's got to be clear. You got to, you know, it's got to be like that placard on your back. You've got to be salt and light. So that legacy will stand strong and you can pass it on to your children, your children's children. It also passes on to your people that you fellowship with, you work with, especially in social media, if you have a blog, whatever it is, they'll know where you stand. And it's consistency. You know, it's not often you see buildings changing shape. They haven't designed that yet. But when you set that building, it's normally there, isn't it? You can rely on it being there, hopefully, if you don't have an earthquake or anything like that. Or it's past its sell-by date and they demolish it. But it's still there. Is that right? Okay. So, one generation shall commend your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts. Now, not everyone's going to be up front and center. Not everyone's going to be famous. You know, I didn't in any way wanted to be prominent. I want to be a cop. but circumstances revealed that I had to be out there. But you've got to make sure that you're not just a passing friend. You're not a tent, you're going to collapse down. You've got to be strong. And make sure that when you are prominent, and I'm sure you are all going to be prominent, I'm not just saying in the media or anything like that, prominent in your life, you make sure that it's up to scrutiny. Everyone's very quick to come to lecterns, or in front of the cameras. But can they take the heat that comes with it? Look at certain people, how they've been compromised because they're not being true to who they are. What is their brand? Okay, next one. One of the practical things that I believe is really important for people who need to have those checks and balances is a vision statement. Has anyone got a vision statement? You got a vision statement? Good. The man at the back. And the young lady. Do you know? Oh, yep, one more. I got a vision statement I've had for over 30 years. And what I like about it, it's based in Scripture, because it's what you're committed to, and sometimes you have to change it. It's an organic thing, but it is a way of benchmarking your progress, and more importantly, if you've gone off track. But sometimes you don't realize you can go off track, but your vision statement is what gives you real focus. If there's anything I want you to hear, is focus. You've got to focus on your brand, who you are, and more importantly, you've got to focus on the Lord and what He wants for you in all aspects of your life. And repeat it again and again. Not necessarily to your children, but to yourself. Because, especially when it comes to parenting, it's consistency, a consistent message. That's why, God was so great when He gave us Jesus, because it was just that consistent message. So, that's really what I'm saying in a practical sense in the life that I have been blessed with. It's not perfect. I'm sure my children will tell you how imperfect I am. Hopefully my wife won't, but hey, you never know. I know my grandson doesn't. He thinks I'm great, Granddad, cup of tea. He loves cups of tea. His name is Judah. He's going to be a strong man. But, he's tapped that reservoir of love which I didn't think existed. And that's the great thing. Realize we are not exhausted in our love for others. We've got to continue build that cup so it overflows and you overflow into people's lives.